Hey guys, Barry McGlady here for another episode of The Comeback Game. And today I'm really grateful and privileged to have one of my long-term mentors, Sharon Pearson. So Sharon's a best-selling author of Ultimate You. And she's also the founder of the Coaching Institute, which was a phenomenal coaching school here in Australia, where I actually started my journey, I think about 7 or 8 years ago now, Sharon. It's been quite some time.
Yep.
Yeah.
All the way back then. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Let me know how I can help. I'm looking forward to this tremendously.
Yeah. So look, Sharon, one of the most impactful things from my journey very early on was how for a long time in my life, I was making wrong the challenges and the problems and the struggles and the things that I had. And this perception that had been painted that life should be, rainbows and fairy floss. And, one of the most, phenomenal moments for me was meeting you and hearing some of your earlier journeys and struggles and challenges that you actually went through before, founding the Coaching Institute, and how a lot of those kind of become the basis and the premise for, the phenomenal transformational work you do now. So I suppose for everyone out there that's watching, listening to this today, let's just find a bit more about you. Like who is Sharon Pearson and what are you kind of doing currently? And then we can take it back to where things started.
Okay, so where I am currently now is very, very fortunate. So I always had a 12-year plan that I would be, and you know this, that I would be out of the business within 10 to 12 years, financially free, doing only the things that I love. So I call it my ideal average day. And so I pretty well live that now. I said that a little self-consciously because there seems to be, I don't know, maybe it's just me, a bit of a stigma around people actually living the dream. So I pretty well am living my ideal average day every day. So I get to write and create and strategize for the companies that I own, the businesses that I have. I'm right now at my beautiful beach house, just chilling out because I can. And the businesses that I own around Australasia are in really good hands and doing really well. And now I'm just finding new ways to express more deeply the stuff that I believe to be true for me. That's really my journey now. So yeah, it's pretty delightful.
Yeah. And you mentioned before, like, the ultimate day and being, somewhat self-conscious to some degree, but it's not through chance. Like you haven't arrived where you are today through chance.
No, there was no silver spoons. I don't think there was wooden spoons. I'm from a background that's really perfectly set up to be very, very successful, Barry. So I'm a failed crime writer who was suicidal and a lock-in. So totally got the trifecta on things that make you a success. So yeah, the journey I've traversed has been really windy. All the meandering streams have been explored. I've made every mistake, like really big, huge financial mistakes and very personal, very hurtful mistakes. None of that, though, could have been avoided for me to be here today where I am now and where I'm heading and who I'm becoming. So my attitude all the way along, and has some of it been easy? Yes. Has most of it been a real challenge? Absolutely. My attitude all the way along has been the obstacles I'm facing are the keys to the doors I have to unlock down the path. So if I can't overcome this obstacle, I don't get the key. If I don't get the key, I won't be able to open the door that I need to open in about a year's time. So everything I face, the good, the bad, the ugly, the hurtful, the traumatic, the delightful, the phenomenal, and the empowering, all of it, all the keys of the piano have given me little pieces of the jigsaw that have enabled me to create a very textured life and financial independence. That wasn't how I always looked at it. I was definitely part of the bleak belief that every setback was more proof of how incapable I was. And everything that went wrong was more proof of how I was wrong. I had a lot of toxic shame in the early days, going back more years than we need to count, where my setbacks were simply evidence of how I'm a failure. That anything that went wrong was simple confirmation of my deep-seated belief I'm no good. So everything that went downhill was simple proof that I'm not worth it, I'm not enough, it's not worth it, why bother? Everything was confirmation of how much I lacked. And I was stuck in that for years and didn't even know it. I thought it was normal. So my programming, my conditioning was such that if something went even a little bit wrong, I could catastrophize that for hours and days. I could take that and run with it and write poems on how it was more evidence of my uselessness and my lack of value and my lack of worth. And I had so many ways to catastrophize. But if you'd asked me to have a good moment and then blow that out and exaggerate that into something wonderful, I had no language for wonderful. I had no way of communicating or articulating a narrative that was gentle for myself or healing or in any way supportive of me. So I was stuck in that space, that dungeon, that canyon, and I didn't see any light for the longest time. And it got so bad that even the thought of finding the energy to feel okay about myself just seemed completely overwhelming, which is where I got to the darkest spot many years ago when I thought, well, if this is all there is, I don't want to do it. I don't want another however many years of this. So that's when I started thinking about maybe it's better if I just check out, and because this is too hard. It really was. But I'd done all of that to me with my level of self-talk and with just a lack of self-care that I had no conscious awareness of, was just nitpicking away at all of my self-esteem until it was very brittle and very frail and very overly sensitive, and everything was a slight, everything offended me, everything was upsetting, everything was wrong. And so my world became so small because anything that took me outside of this tiny comfort zone, this prison, was too challenging for me to handle. So I just got myself in this tiny box of despair where any direction would just be more evidence of what I'd proven to myself for years. So that's where I got myself before I began to turn it all around. So very, very different. I'm describing that as somebody who doesn't really recognize. I hear the words because I know the story, but I say them not really getting how that is the same person that is here today. That's quite a mystery to me, that I can say the words and not feel anything except for compassion for that person that I was.
And really appreciate you sharing that. Even noticing in myself the difference in the way that's delivered and spoken from the 7-8 years ago when we spoke back then as well. And I know you're doing a lot of fantastic work. You've recently released a best-selling book, The Ultimate You, which is absolutely phenomenal. But I suppose for the people out there, because, I say we've worked in this space for a long time, you for a lot longer than what I have. It seems to be quite normal for people to experience, severe levels of negative self-talk and patterning that just doesn't set us up to live a fulfilling and I say healthy lifestyle. And I say I choose the word healthy because, I myself have been in those patterns as well. And it's like once you get stuck in that cycle, it's very, very hard to break it because you create an environment or a world that supports going further and further down. Yeah,
there's lots of evidence, isn't there? There's a lot of evidence for the doom and the gloom if you go hunting for it. I certainly found it.
So what I'm really curious about is how does someone that's in that downward, spiral that whose world is just closing in further and further, like at what point is something new introduced? At what point is there, that defining moment where it's like, okay, well, I could go and commit suicide. That's one option. But how do you even bring about a secondary option that, well, hang on, what if it wasn't like this? What if there was some other way to be doing life than what I've chosen for so long? Like how do you arrive at that point of choosing something different? Because I'm sure even when you were going through the experience, there must have been times that you tried to be happy or to do something other than what was going on. What did that look like?
Well, I actually didn't. What I did instead was kept thinking this has got to be rock bottom. And I've heard all the people say if you hit rock bottom, that's as low as you can go, and then that's when you find. But I kept finding new lows. So, man, I was very dedicated at finding the tragedy in my life. So I just kept finding new lows. I kept finding new, because I really did hear, when you hit rock bottom, that's when you turn things around. And I kept thinking, this is it, I've hit rock bottom. And then I'd find another bottom. And I just kept falling and falling and falling. So I don't know that I really did do much to help myself.
Well, there was one part in that. It sounds to me that there was one part in that looking for the turnaround. It's
I kept thinking, this is it, I've hit rock bottom. But I kept digging.
like looking for it, but actually not taking the action towards it.
I didn't hit right. I had nothing within me that could, until everybody's turning point, I believe, is going to be very personal. It's based on our own truths. My truth was my rock bottom. And for some reason I needed a rock bottom. I know other people have turned it around with a lot less doom and gloom than I have. And that's, more power to them. My rock bottom was realizing I was thinking about checking out. And I had a very serious talk with myself. It's like, Sharon, for real, you're checking out and you're at this age, I was in my 30s, and yet you're looking around and seeing people who've had much more credible reasons to be miserable, and they're building a great life. So having some bad experiences is not the reason you're where you are. It's what I did with those bad experiences. And that level of self-awareness, I believe, triumphs everything. When we can, as bleak it is, look at ourselves and honestly say, I put myself here. How do I know that? Well, all I've got to do is look at Nelson Mandela, who had spent 29 years in solitary confinement and came out as a champion of compassion. And I'm sitting here with my misery and my tears and my chocolates, whinging. And I have not had that experience. Or I look at Oprah or anybody. I just had to look around at some really phenomenal people who had been change agents in the world. And the commonality, the reason I was inspired by them, all of them had this common thread of, in the face of injustice, they triumphed. In the face of tragedy, they managed to turn it around. In the face of incredible setbacks that I couldn't even imagine facing, they dug within themselves. And so I was standing there. I can remember the day, Barry. I was standing there. Sorry about I've got cockatoos demanding food right now, so we'll ignore those. I was standing there just realizing the truth, the enormous truth, that these people had triumphed in their own way, and all of them still face challenges. If they haven't passed away, they're not perfect, but even in the face of their imperfections, the marvelous contribution they've made to humanity and to the people in their lives. And I'm sitting here bleeding because life's not going my way. Like, really, some perspective, Sharon. You don't have those stories, but you're acting like you've got a worse one. And that was my turning point. It was just, come on, really? You think you're checking out because everything isn't going your way? You think you're checking out even though you've got this good stuff? Whereas these people who had nothing have found a way that they can't be okay. And so I made a decision in that moment. And I hope this is useful. Everyone's going to fire themselves up in their own way. But my way was, you've spent 37 years getting into this hole and learning how to suck at living life, and learning how to be miserable, and learning how to be lonely, and learning how to be sick. How about you dedicate the next 37 years to learning how to be filled with love and compassion and abundance and giving and just expansion. So I'd learned 37 years of contraction. How about if I put 37 years into figuring out what it means to be expansive? So I'd lived 37 years in fear. What would it look like if I trained my mind and my body to live 37 years in love? And that was the turning point for me. I had nothing else to do. The alternative was pretty bleak. And so I made that commitment to myself. I'm going to figure out, I'm going to train my brain the way I trained my brain to suck at life. I'm going to start retraining my brain like this is day one. I'm going to learn how to cherish life and thrive in life. And that's been my dedication since then. It's been, as you know, 16 years, just completely dedicated, deeper and deeper levels. What does it mean to cherish life, to have a meaningful life, to feel fulfilled, to feel not pleasure, but a genuine joy, just a bubbling brook of joy for no reason. Because I had a consistent feeling of dread for 37 years. So what would it mean to have a consistent feeling of love? And it never occurred to me it would be a reality. And it has been. And so that's the quest of my life now. I've got 37 years to commit to learning deeper levels of love and to cherish and to have meaning and fulfillment and to feel inner joy for no reason other than this moment.
One thing that stood out for me in what you just shared is in that moment that you had that conversation with yourself, it was almost like the focus went from that of self to that of others. Is you'd spent that a long amount of time like focusing on self and all that wasn't right for you. Yet in that moment, you started to look at others outside of you. It's like your focus began to start to look at, Gandhi and Oprah and people like that and go, okay, well, what are these people doing? And I think you'll agree, or maybe you won't, but, something that I've found is that when our focus is on the contribution to others, we can live a far more meaningful life than one is of contribution to self. Can you talk a little bit about that balance? Like, how do you allow yourself to have the healthy boundaries of giving to you and filling your cup up while serving others in a meaningful way as well?
I didn't have that balance for a long time. It's 37 years to learn how, Barry. I didn't get day one and just know how. I was really appalling in the beginning, the first couple of years, about any sense of self. So the reason I dug that hole for myself, and I think most people will relate, if we're feeling really crap about ourselves and we feel lack of worth and lack of I'm enoughness, it's toxic shame of fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough, fear of not being lovable. That's it. We fear we're not loved and we're not lovable enough. That is it. So it took a few years where that wasn't my focus. So, if we start, my D-Day was that day when I was 37 years old. The first couple of years was that my focus was on how to be lovable, because that just seemed very unreachable. And I don't recommend anybody, if they relate to this story, immediately starts figuring out how to be lovable through giving. It doesn't happen that way. What happens is, for me, and what seems to work really well for the people I work with and who I help, is you don't believe in, you've heard this, you don't believe in you in the beginning, but believe in something that works. Just find a pathway that someone has worked and walked and it's worked for them. And so I did that for 2 years. I surrendered. I don't know. I can't change me. I have no clue how to create something extraordinary within me or around me. I'm at a loss. But these people, and my pathway and your pathway in the beginning was coaching, this pathway seems to work when people work the program. So I just made a commitment. I gave up knowing. I literally surrendered having any answers. And I just began to walk the pathway that the greats before me had worked. And I'm such a fan of modeling. I stand on the shoulders of the greats that preceded me with such gratitude and humility. I stand on the shoulders of Jim Rohn, who said, it is when you help enough people, dreams come true, your own dreams get taken care of. How many times have you heard this? That's enough for me. You talk about it being compassion. I heard Jim Rohn say, and I said, well, this man led an extraordinary life. I am not. I'm going to shut the F up and I'm going to help other people's dreams come true. And so I just began to do that. Then I heard somebody else say, I'm trying to remember, there's a couple of quotes that it's all I needed. I just needed something. There was a quote about, you give with that expectation of getting. And I apologize that I can't remember the original source. I'm sure the original source goes back thousands of years. Okay, so I started giving. Not because I thought contribution is good the way we know it today, but because this expert had said it and I don't have a clue on how to live a great life. So I'm just going to zip it and I'm going to give. And miraculously and through just these fundamental truths, I went from zero, and really my story is there, $1 million turnover, surprising myself tremendously, simply on those two philosophies, helping other people's dreams come true, using a system that works to give. And I just did that until I realized it was never about me. It was never about me. I am simply the conduit to giving. And then, of course, it does become about me because as I gave, I began to heal. But I didn't give in the beginning to heal. I gave in the beginning because they seemed to know how to live an extraordinary life, and I had no clue. And that's how it all began.
Wow, there's so much in there. What do you think, for the people out there right now that are going through challenges and adversity? what is something that you'd suggest for these people to be able to take a snapshot of their life and sit back and have that conversation and start to see a journey forward, a journey to where they can heal? Because, most people I meet are looking for a more enriched life than what they're currently living. They're looking for a greater sense of love or fulfillment or finances or, time, the basic necessities in life, but yet so stuck in the way that things have always been. And if they're listening to this right now, they're listening to it because they're wanting to make some form of a comeback. They're wanting to transform their life. Now, I don't know anybody else more experienced than yourself in helping people to shift and find that for them. So what's some advice that you'd give them, or what's some stuff that you'd share, maybe even some of the extracts from your most recent book that you've written as well?
Well, there's so much. We could unpack this really over months and months and months, but the journey begins with the realization that most people want their fair share. So in terms of business and added value and getting money in the bank and making a success, because this is a business focus, understand the golden rule. Most people work from a premise: what's in it for me? Am I getting my fair share? The moment we accept that most people are worried about whether or not they're getting their fair share, you've won. Because all you do is make sure everybody gets their fair share. Now, what's fair share? Equal or more than half. So most people's math is, if I get an equal amount or a little bit better, that's fair. That's human nature. It's part of our survival mechanism. The moment you know that, you have the key to the city, because all you do is make sure everybody gets equal or more than half. And as long as we reprogram ourselves away from that, the selfish dream, Richard Dawkins calls it, the moment we move away from the need to get our fair share and we measure fair as in everybody gets more, we've done it. We're smashing it. We are smashing business success. So I measure fair if everybody else gets more than half. So if everybody else, all my clients, all my team, they're getting more than they expect or how they measure fair, if I can give them more, or our business can give them more, or the program can give them more, we call it stacking the cool, as you know, then we know they're going to be delighted because they won. And all the time, we've won. So that's the first thing. It's get our heads around this notion of, but I just want a client. I just want to make some money. Why isn't it happening for me? Stop. The questions, they're not the questions. The question is, how can I provide more than their fair share? How can I provide more than their fair share? How can I provide more than their fair share? Stop with the whiny internal voice about me, because now you're doing what the majority of people do, and the majority of people have really, really, really ordinary results. So why the fuck would you listen to the majority? The minority know how the game is played. It's to be generous and make sure everybody gets more than half. So everybody feels like they're winning. The moment they feel like they're winning, they're loyal, and you've created a client base, raving fans, and you just keep doing that. And as you become more and more successful, as we have, we get to be more and more generous. We get to stack the cool more and more. And it becomes almost like fusion energy. It becomes inevitable, invincible, and never ending, this source of eternal flame, because the giving can keep on happening and happening. So we're just on this train of 16 years of giving, and the snowball just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger about giving, because we come from this premise of we win when everybody else gets more than their fair share. So that's the first golden rule that I operate from. It's, how do I stack the cool in such a way that people around me are blown away? I'm not worried about whether or not I'm getting my fair share back, because I measure my fair share as anything less than half. So if I constantly measure myself as winning, if I get less than half, I'm always winning and everybody else is feeling awesome. Is that making sense? So wow. To me, it's just so easy to do. And then when other people start catching on, they're going to win because they're going to start doing the same thing, and they're going to feel amazing from giving more than half. So we're just creating endless people who feel amazing because they get to give, know that everybody feels that they're winning. So that's the first golden rule that we've operated from for the longest time, just the longest time, and getting better and better at iterating that constantly. The narrative is getting deeper and more thorough and more generous, and just really diving into what does it mean to help them feel they've won. That's the first thing. So we've taken care of their immediate need, which is what's in it for me. Yeah. And the second question our market is always asking is, am I enough? Am I worthy? Am I enough? So everything we do and everything I've done now, I did it naturally without knowing this was such a golden rule. And it became articulate to me probably in the last couple of years, maybe. Everyone's thinking, okay, what's in it for me? And am I getting enough? And then they're diving into, okay, am I significant? Do I matter? And it's the unconscious fear in everybody is, I'm insignificant. And the unconscious hope in everybody is, I am significant. I matter beyond myself. So what we do is we create ever, and I know you know this, Barry, you've seen it. We create groups and communities where diving in and even contributing just a little bit is heralded and held up as progress, as evidence of their I matteredness. And we find we have 17 to 20 different ways of doing that for people. And you mentioned earlier before we started this, it's about the hero's journey. And we're very plugged into the hero's journey. The hero's journey at the Coaching Institute is science to us. There are 12 steps that people are going to go through in the hero's journey. In the beginning of the journey, they're in an ordinary world. They're stuck. They feel the ordinary world is reality. They have a turning point coming up. They meet you or they meet someone in an environment that's in the extraordinary world, and they refuse the call. We're going to stay on course, maintaining being the character of excellence that they need us to be until they accept the call. And now they're in the unusual world. So they've gone over the threshold, as you know. Now they're in the journey. But they now need to gather elixirs and magic potions and a sword, and they need to meet mentors. For them to become heroic in their own lives, they have to gather all these resources to believe that they're enough. So we're there at the Coaching Institute providing the elixir, the magic potion, the sword, the mentors. And metaphorically, that translates to the resources, the answers, the support, the technology, the championship, the discussion groups, the hand-holding, the reassurance, whatever the form the magic elixir needs to be until they're ready to pick up the sword and say, I am my own hero. We take the role of hero until they decide they can be their own hero. So the whole of TCI has been mapped to the hero's journey. Then when they decide they're their own hero, we become less involved and less hand-holdy, but more about now to show, because remember in the hero's journey, Luke didn't come back just blowing up the Death Star. He came back with gifts for the kingdom and weirdly getting his sister, but that's another story. But anyway, he came back and realized something true about himself, which he could never have got if he hadn't had the journey. And so what we do in that section there is say, and I know you know this, you're now your own hero. You now must share with the community. You've got to bring to the campfire that which you've become. And so there's this constant loop of people sharing and championing the people who are coming through and who aren't quite their own heroes yet. So there's this constant support network. For people who want to be supported, there are some people who are going, this isn't for me, and that's cool. But for most people, it provides tremendous support. So they're the two golden rules that we seem to be operating from with a lot of depth. And I can unpack that for hours, but in many ways, the question is, do they believe they're enough? And do they believe they're getting enough? And if we can answer those two questions really well in a cool way that they relate to and perceive as valuable, we're going to do okay. And I think that's true for any business at any level. For your first client or to, like us, for our 10,000th client, it makes no difference. It's literally to what degree can you take care of their need for enough?
Yeah, what I absolutely love about that as well, though, is that the bigger your community grows, the bigger it grows. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of businesses that, the bigger it grows, the more resources are required to keep that business growing, the more fuel it needs, the more timber it needs. Whereas you guys have nailed an environment that's self-sustaining. And what I mean by that is the more members you produce that become those ambassadors and those heroes in themselves, the more the campfire stays stoked.
Absolutely. We do not measure success because somebody's left us and built a campfire. That's not success. Because genuine success is inclusive, expansive, and brings everybody along. So if someone builds a campfire, they've got to bring some timber back because that's the way they know they're contributing beyond themselves, exactly as they had contributed to them. So the idea that I can take to success to me is a fallacy, and it's empty promise, and it's a very hollow prize to succeed without the contribution or giving in a way that has meaning and is significant to people. It's easy to say, oh, I'm a really good giver, I give money, I sign checks, but to give in a way that takes time and takes some thought and takes some energy, and to as you do and so many of our members have done and our graduates have done, bring the campfire timber back and say, this is a new way to look at it, or this is the way we look at it. And as you say, self-perpetual campfires are everywhere now, with a lot of monitoring from us. We're full-time 12 to 14 hours a day monitoring all our discussion groups. We have something like 25 of them. But they're just managed and monitored in such a way around inclusion, expansion, compassion, generosity, experience, and giving. And they're just the fundamental laws that we bring every single day to the community. Seems to be working. I mean, in staggering ways. And the success stories that are coming out from our coaches are ridiculous. It's wonderful, wonderful to see. And I truly believe it's not because they learned the skills. I think you can learn coaching skills anywhere. I think it's because our coaches have been taught, reminded of, reignited around this notion around there is a place for kindness and generosity and giving and contribution beyond ourselves, that the humility of giving is more important than the arrogance of the success.
Yeah. It's very self-perpetuating, and it comes back a little bit what we spoke about before and the journey we go through in terms of self and through that evolution. One thing that's just come up for me in that, and I'm curious to dive down into a little bit, is the journey that you had to go through as that tribal leader, right? The journey that you had to shift through within yourself from being, Sharon Pearson coaching to evolving this, multi-million dollar, I say self-perpetuating. I know there's a lot of things that happen behind the scene to keep a company like that, moving forwards. But I'd love to know, what were some of the fundamental shifts that had to be made within inside of you? Like recently I've removed myself from my business as well. And I know that my personal experience was that I had several identity shifts. It was like every time I handed over something, first it was the coaching and then it was the marketing and It was like I personally went through this bit of a shift, almost like, well, who am I now?
Yep.
Who am I now in my organization that I don't need to be the coach anymore? I don't need to be the salesperson anymore. Like where is my space here in this environment? It's almost like I had to keep reinventing myself. And I'd love, for someone who's a bit further along to understand within you, what did you kind of find were some of those big shifts you had to make within inside of yourself and within your environment to be where you're at now?
I'll count them when I get there, but I'm feeling it's 3 or 4 major shifts, and we'll add up accurately at the end and look back. The first iteration of the business, so the business going from 0 to, I'm not clear, 3 to 4 million a year maybe, this is a long time ago, we're a sales company. So it's all about sales. Unapologetically, we have to be a powerhouse of bringing business in. Cash flow is king in a startup. Cash flow is king. Cash flow is king. This is not the time for equity. This is not the time for flashy assets that depreciate because of the flash car and nonsense. It's cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. So, Barry, I think it's 3 to 5 million a year. I can't remember, but I knew cash was king, sales were king. It was all about just getting the sales happening. To make that happen, we had to wow and everything else that I've said, but it certainly wasn't as sophisticated as it is now.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was trial and error and figuring it out. So my first hat was sales leader. So I would sell on the floor. I literally took calls myself. I was generating 2 million a year myself, easily. More. And then on stage, obviously in webinars, I was selling as well. So I was the gatekeeper of everything that was possible. And I just wanted to set benchmarks for the organization moving forward that were undeniable. They're irrefutable. The benchmark is it's 30% conversion on the floor and it's 30 to 90% on stage. Go forth, and until you reach that benchmark, you're still learning. End of discussion. So anybody who comes after me, they're your numbers. That's it. These are the records, these are the benchmarks, this is what I averaged. And until you hit those, you're learning, and you need to be humble as a learner and not think, well, this isn't working. No, you're not working it. So everything in the first 3-4 years was about establishing phenomenal benchmarks, and sales were king. At around about, I can't remember exactly, I think it was 3 to 7 million, my hat changed from it's still about sales and marketing, but it moved to I now have to backfill everything I've done. So not my strength, but interestingly is my strength, is writing systems and operations manuals. So for the next 2 to 3 years, to ensure replicability, sustainability, scalability, it became about back-ending everything that had been done. There was a system for opening up in the morning, a system for locking up, answering the phone, answering an email. Every single class I did in those first few years was recorded, transcribed, turned into lesson plans, and taught. So the business is run through an ascension model. There's the basic program, next level, so on. Basic level had to be completely recorded, transcribed, lesson planned, documented, notes for the facilitator on how to run it. Then I would listen to the facilitator until they reached best practice. I trained them myself till core, the first program, I was out. Then I did it for the next level and the next, and I've done it for the final level, the bigger program. So that journey was very much systems focused. So I moved, if you look at the Trust Me model of Spiral Dynamics, I moved from the power of bringing the tribe together and winning to the systems of everything that had given us our wins so they could be replicated beyond myself. Then the next level became about, okay, horrible time in the business. And I'm sure anybody who's done these numbers can relate. There comes a point when the entrepreneur steps back and has a manager leading people. When I was leading people, everything was entrepreneurial. We could change on a dime. We wanted a new direction. I can invent a program in a minute and we'd be launched and we'd be doing hundreds of thousands in sales and just go. And everyone would just, the whole ship would turn because I had an idea. It gets to a number in your team, and generally that number is around 15. It's 12 to 15 people. And I don't know what the dollar amount is. It's different for every business. For me, it was around 7 million a year. There comes a point when you get to that number where you can't have everybody directly reporting to you. 7 to 9 is the maximum you can have reporting to you and have any mental health. 10, you're going insane. By number 12, you start raising crazy and wondering why you ever did this. So that moment when you have someone reporting to someone that isn't you, oh my God, it's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. The entrepreneurial wasteland, when suddenly the manager hears what you say in manager speak, not entrepreneur set the world on fire speak. Oh, someone now. I don't drink and I don't have chocolate. Can you imagine my despair when I say these words? I've got I just want to have a drink. It's like, because they hear manager speak. They hear translate into an operation. And then they go and tell the person that reports to them. And it's, I reckon, 10% of the original message survived. Because learning that next stage, that third stage, is learning how to manage managers.
Yeah.
How do you keep the fire alive and the entrepreneurial passion alive and the beauty of the magnificent flexible organism that is what you've created? Because everything up until then is an extension of you. And now it's not. It's an extension of others. And it's so hard. So that third stage, I don't know what to call it, but it really becomes about learning how to keep the vision alive while people do their best to turn it into an ops manual. It's just whatever you want to call that. I call it hell on earth, but that's just me. Everyone's got to go through it. Yeah. It's not about learning to let go. It's about learning to let go in such a way. It's so much more complex. So you just got to learn to let go. I wish. You've got to let go in such a way that you're good enough to hire people who can maintain the visionary dream. And that comes with bad hires and terrible hires and people who sabotage and people who have completely different intentions. And the worst hire of your life hasn't even been done yet. And then finally, you get one person who can hear the vision in the notes you're singing it, and the song retains. And that is magic. That is just the most magic moment is when they're finally, the whole organization's playing not just chopsticks. It's starting to play a bit of there's some harmonies going, there's a bit of, it's pretty wonderful. And then you might do it again and then it's horrible, 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 horrible. And then it could be again. And in the meantime, you've lost your first wonderful visionary because they're sick of all the bureaucrats. And that is a terrible, tough time. And my best advice is either stay smaller than that time, which is 12 in your team or smaller, and stay directly in contact with the team, or get beyond that so that it's self-sustaining and managers can hire managers. But to stay in that horrible wasteland where you're still responsible for hiring people who can translate your vision, you're still in the business up to here. You just don't want to admit it. And then the next iteration was, so we went from sales to systems of sales, then systems that are self-perpetuating of all the previous, and that was replacing delivery as well. And then the next stage was, well, how do we elevate this to mission? So anybody who comes on board is culturally aligned. We don't fight for it. They have to. And that was really the moment of the business. Well, it still had some really hard times, but very much the business stood for what I saw it originally as meant to have stood for. It finally was an iteration I recognized as close to my truth as possible, where we hired on values, we hire on the vision, we fire on the values, we fire on the vision. We performance manage on the values, we develop people on the values. Everything is values driven. Everyone knows the values. Everyone can recite the 10 values. Everybody knows what's expected of them in terms of the values. Our audience, our wonderful posse, our community know our values and use our values and incorporate their values in their businesses. And there's just an expectation, if you're part of TCI in any capacity, you're culturally positive or you shouldn't be here. And we're clear about that for our team as much as we're clear about that for our community. You're either culturally positive and aligned, and if any time anyone sabotages it, you're politely asked to, maybe you should go somewhere else where that attitude is appreciated, where that behavior is wanted, but it's not okay here. And so it's again that self-perpetual and self-sustaining support now, because culture is king and culture is everything. And we live, die, breathe, and are completely nurtured on culture and all of what that means, which is about compassion and support and expectation and delivering what we say we're going to deliver. I could just go on and on what that means. And the more richly we learn what that means, the more richly the business is expressing itself, I believe, as a truest expression of any individual as it could be. What do I mean by that? Before this, it was individuals in a mechanism trying to win. Now it's the entire business really is representative of any individual in the business. And so they're not straining to be the business or to fit in. It's who they are and who they would be naturally. So the business is an expression of the team. Perfectly? No. Majorly? Yes. Yes. And that would be the iteration we're at now. Although we've just moved to the next stage, which I'm not part of because I've got a different person running my business now. So the numbers then went from 7 to 10, then 10 to 14 million. And those larger numbers, which in our industry in Australia, Barry, they're good numbers.
Big numbers, yeah.
They're really big numbers for this industry. That's very much about me getting out of the way and not messing things up anymore. So, yeah, the best thing I could have done was step aside and let somebody who's got an even keel but appreciates the vision as much as this person does. So that's the iteration we're in now, where I'm out and really banned from being there because I'm not super helpful anymore. You know, if I have an idea, it has to go through them. I can't go directly, and I don't go directly to anybody in the business. If I have an idea, it goes to them. It's up to them whether it comes to life and when it comes to life, which is very frustrating for me because I want it now because I'm pure entrepreneur, but they're my sweeper. I have an idea, they'll make sure it happens. Whereas before, I was really underselling myself. My skill is to come up with a brilliant idea. It is not to write the system for it and make sure everyone's doing it and performance managing it. So now we've got the best of both worlds with this amazing team where I have the idea and they get to bring it to life and breathe life into it in a way that's sustainable and doable for everybody in the business and for our community. So I think that's 5 stages, maybe.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah. Do you feel now that you've been through that so intimately with your business that there's aspects from the later stage you could be bringing in earlier, like the stuff around the culture? Like I know you guys have had very strong values for a long time now.
Yeah.
But going through that, do you feel that if you were to do it again, you'd be able to bring a person earlier to help with the systems and processes, or would you still be doing it very similar to what you've just done it?
Well, I had amazing PA called Robin many years ago when I was doing very small numbers. I think about 3 million, 4 million. And she was writing the condition of getting the job. And then the amazing Mez was the other PA. The condition of getting the job was they had to write a new system daily. So I have always had that, but it was the undercurrent when we're into sales mode. When it moved to systems mode, it became very much everybody in the organization had to write a system a week to stay in the organization. That was the shift. So it was always there. It just moved up in focus. Could I have done that sooner? No. I did not know what I needed to know, and I hadn't made the mistakes I needed to make to know how to have done that sooner. I didn't appreciate it for what it was until in hindsight, it's so obvious. And I teach it, as you know, I now teach from day one. Tell me about the culture of your business. Tell me about the culture of you. I'm much more interested in what you're aligned with than where you think you're going to make your money. I was not capable of that conversation when I began. In the beginning, it really was, where am I going to make my money? And, more power to me. I didn't have anybody. Culture. I had people, sales. That's who I had around me at the time. So could it be done sooner? Hopefully, if someone's hearing this message or any of the wonderful messages you're bringing them, yes. Could I have? No.
No. Yeah, it's interesting speaking to different entrepreneurs and the way that they've reached where they've reached within their business and the journey. There is all these models out there, but I think a lot of it does come down to what's the fit for you. And I don't know, I find for myself, often people would tell me something and I'd still go it alone or go it my way.
Yeah.
Like I would still model mentors and successful people, but I would still have to almost fail forwards myself to kind of really get the lessons at my core to then go, okay, I've tried that. It didn't work.
Yep.
Let's go back this way. Yep. Who have been some of the real game changers for you in your journey, like in terms of mentors and coaches along the way? And if you could list a few and maybe like, what was the key piece of advice or key that they actually gave you when you needed it that's seen you kind of propel forwards?
I'm really fortunate in the timing of when my support team have turned up around me. Support team, including people who've never met me and don't know me. Michael Gerber, very early in the entrepreneurial myth.
Yeah.
Very substantial influence and impact on the way I did business in the early days and the way I do business. I don't run it now, but the way it's run now, in that if you haven't replaced yourself, you're having an entrepreneurial seizure. And I was mentored by him personally many, many years ago, and he said, you are on a narcissistic path to destruction. Stop it and change. Okie dokie. Wow. So I did. So I'm very grateful for that conversation. I get hairs up on my neck when I think about it. It was like 2 minutes of gold. It's like, yep, you're right. So Michael Gerber gave me, and then I worked with an action coach many years ago called Ashley. Can't remember his surname. I'm sorry about that, Ashley. But anyway, you'll find him online if you want to go to Action Coaching. And they taught me the basics of good business. It isn't just to be a good technician. So I was a great coach, big deal. There's always lots of great coaches. I also need to be great at all these other things. So sales, marketing, administration, some IT, or at least enough to know where I'm not wasting my money, finance, delivery, and then culture and leadership. And it wasn't enough for me to just stay in tech mode. I knew I was very easily going to make the shift. I don't know why I just made that shift very easily from just me to many. And so I need to get across all of those 6 or 7 skills with no excuses. So I have an approach that's not linear, but what I call multiplistic. And I got that from those 2 people. If you're not across all 7 of these, including your professional education, you're not really heading where you say you're going to head. You're just talking game, but you're not walking talk. So that was very, very significant. Then within each of those frames, I've had a different mentor I've drawn on. So at each of those 7 frames, there's been someone who has guided me and assisted me directly through hiring the help or through me going to the resource, buying the program, making the investment. So in coaching, that was the guys who created NLP. So I just think they're geniuses, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, just phenomenal. Milton Erickson, Tony Robbins, anybody in that field of transformational change without the heartbreak. More recently, it's moved to more family therapy type of messages, much more healing, a lot more compassion, a lot more delving deeply in, because I realized the incongruence between peak state and needing to be sad. And so there's a lot more John Bradshaw and a lot more family therapy work. In sales, many sources. I've got a library over there that would have 12 different sources. In marketing, should I name them all?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Frank Kern for the program I recommend is Mass Control, if you can still get it.
Yeah.
Just magic. Just change. It added, as I've told him, took us from 5 to 10 million in 2 years. Just one program for $2,000. Don't ever tell me the investment's not worth it. It's just, you just need one great idea, makes the entire investment worth it. That's gold. And also the guy who does product launch formula, Jeff Walker. Jeff Walker, thank you, and his brother John. So those two programs really helped me with marketing. And then anything by Dan Kennedy, by Dan Kennedy. He trained all of us. He is the father of all of direct marketing. Then Gary Holbert and anybody else who wrote great copy. So then I got really good at copywriting and dived into anything on copywriting. So I would have read 20 books on copywriting, and I just trained myself in how to write copywriting. Administration, I learned from hiring experts to train me. I didn't really have a source that I could go to around that. Same for IT and same for finance. Culture, many sources. And it really depends. I started with Good to Great, and then I moved into anything by John Maxwell and anything by Stephen Covey. The speed of trust, transformational in my business. And then it became about stepping back and seeing some of the businesses that were doing well culturally, not just in numbers, and seeing the macro strategy that we're using. So at the time I was doing all of this, I didn't know about a little company called Zappos. Then I discovered Zappos and realized everything they were doing was great confirmation and mirroring what I was doing and not knowing it had a frame. So I went to them and got the frame. So all the time I was tracking for these 7 pieces and just digging down on all 7 all the time. So when it became ready for that part of the game, I was ready for the game. It wasn't, oh gosh, what do I do now? I trained with Ashley, that business coach, for 2 years, so that as we built the systems, they were best practice, because he was trained by
Brad Sugars.
Thank you, my friend Brad Sugars. I'm so sorry about that. It's just so bad. So always looking for source material where they've walked their talk. So I don't buy theory. I don't do hypotheses. I just do show me where you got the game. And if the game's aligned with us culturally, I don't mind if the results are only okay, but they've always been pretty good. And now I'm just going to take that idea, train myself, apply it badly, apply it better, go back and retrain and look where my gaps are until I achieve best practice or exceed it. And I've done that over and over again now for nearly 20 years.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. You know, anyone that thinks that success is overnight is wrongly misled by all the phenomenal marketers and influencers out there. You know, you said before, there's never a bad investment, and that's certainly something that I've taken on board. And one thing that always stuck with me from you is, you know, you would talk of all the programs that you went through where you just buy everything. You just buy it, you would consume it, you'd implement it, and you'd be on to the next one. And that was something that you instilled in me from a very, very early age. And, you know, I think has had a massive tribute to the success that we've got as well. Is it's not a matter of having it, but actually having it, as you said, apply it badly, apply it a bit better, and learn the process, and then pass it on to your team
Absolutely. Who are we starting from zero to think we know? When you tap into any program, you're tapping into 10 to 20 years of expertise. So for the sake of 2K or whatever amount, I could just tap into 20 years of expertise, or for the price of a book, or I can buy, my biggest investment was $50K to buy a program for one idea. Barry, I got one idea. But you know, small hinges swing really big doors, and that one idea was the money back guarantee that we provide at the Coaching Institute. If as a result of using our systems and graduating on time, for any reason you don't earn back your entire course fees, we'll refund your course fees and you get to keep everything because that's how cool we are. That guarantee has been in place now for 10 years.
Yeah.
Transformative. There's only one other coaching school in the world who offers it. And $50K I paid for that one sentence. $50K. But it made us so good because that was as my mentor at the time called it, an undies tightening guarantee. And any guarantee that makes your undies tidy is a good one. So then we just started reverse engineering everything to make sure the systems would make that a reality.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not the amount of the investment, it's the amount of the return, and it's on me to get the return.
Yeah.
That's on me.
Yeah. That's one significant thing that I see differs from you and other people that I've seen that blame programs. And it's like, I've done that program. I got one idea and that idea was worth $100,000 to me, worth $500,000 to me. It's not the program. It's your level of thinking you're entering it in and what you're looking for and where you're playing the game at.
Yeah. And literally just one sentence I paid $50K for. I'm sorry, but please, what's the amount of the investment? Do it. You just need one idea. But it's very hard to see that if you've not got your ship moving. So the people I hear complaining about not getting value or it didn't work, it's because they're not working it. Why aren't they working it? Because they've got nothing happening. The ship's just sitting in harbour and everything's in planning stage. I've always got value from every program I've ever invested in simply because the ship's on the move and I need to throw repairs or I need to update the keel, and I run out of metaphors for ships here, but you know what I mean? I had to repair a lot on the go because we're out in the ocean and the waves aren't small. So it had to happen in real time. It wasn't like I was sitting safely in the harbour going, oh, I wonder if that will work. It was that better work, because if it doesn't, we're not going to survive the next wave. So it was very much I got myself in the ocean and then figured it out. So imperfect implementation beats perfect planning any day. Yeah.
Yeah. Sharon, we've had a phenomenal time. We've just about gone full time. You did warn me at the start that I'd have to wrap you up because I know that you could speak for days on end without any slides or anything whatsoever. That's something that I really admire about you. What's one golden nugget you want to leave everybody with out there that's watching or listening? And also then please give a plug to your most recent book, which I think is phenomenal, will be of huge value to the guys out listening today.
Okay, one just feels like I'm shortchanging people. Okay, one.
Okay, 3.
No idea. 3 is like my number. If I get 3, I can breathe again. Make your purpose bigger than your problems. So very early in the game, I heard that and I've just lived by that. So my purpose is bigger than the problems I have. So just look at it as problems are the ruts in the road, and you need a good enough vehicle that can handle ruts. And if your vehicle's sloppy and not defined and not really believed in, and you don't take care of it, you don't drive it well, you're going to feel every bump. I don't feel the bumps that much. Or if I do, they're a pretty big bump. They're a crater. And we're going to find a way over it because the purpose gets us through it. So that would be the first thing.
Yeah.
Purpose is everything. Second thing, do not believe this stuff that it all has to be flow. And if it's not flow, it's wrong. It is bone-jarringly, horribly, masochistic in the beginning. Anybody who becomes an entrepreneur and becomes successful at it, they have done bone-jarring stuff. There was no flow when I was burning my own CDs. This is before any of the technology we have now. Creating my own jewel case covers, printing them up, writing them by hand delivering them in my area. Please, there was no flow. It was, I'm going to do the yards so I can earn the miles. So I did. So less, it didn't feel right, and more, it's going to feel how it's going to feel, bitch, do it. So a lot more of that to be successful, because resilience is key. If you're not ready to push it, you're going to get pushed, and that's it. Whoever has the strongest frame is the one doing the shoving. So, and the business world doesn't care, nor should they. So you're having a bad day, no one cares. You got to suck it up and you got to keep going. So that would be my second piece, is do what it takes, and less of what you feel good doing. Goodness me. You get the luxury of doing what feels good, once you've done all the stuff that nobody else wants to do. The cold calling, the packing, the late nights, the printing a manual and realizing it printed on the wrong page. So you're there till literally 5 a.m. reprinting everything. There's no flow in that, Barry. And then I had to be on stage the next day at 10 a.m. training for 12 hours. There's no flow. It's just yakka. And I just did it. So that would be my second. And the third, love where you're at. Really love where you're at. Wherever you're at, whatever you're experiencing, love it deeply and with gratitude. Because wanting to get to the next field is a recipe for disaster. If you can't fertilize and water and nurture this field, you're going to trash that person's field as well. I remember once somebody saying to me, I generally, when I used to work in the business, this is 3 or 4 years ago, I never started before 11, as you know. All trainings start after I start, all start at 12 because I just don't like working in the morning. I'm not going to do it, never have. And someone in our organization said, you're so lucky. I wish I could do that. And say, if you wish that you could start at 11, you also need to wish for midnight days, 7 days a week for the first 2 years, because that's what I did. I didn't even have Christmas Day off. I did not have a single day off for 2 years. I just did business. And I had to love where I was at or I was going to conk out and feel burnout. You don't burn out on what you love. You burn out on what doesn't feed your fire. So you've got to love where you're at. And this whole principle of I want more clients, you've got to love the clients you have. If you can't handle where you're at, the universe isn't delivering you more of the same. You're already shown you can't handle it. You know, people always tell me, how do I make $1 million? You know, you're a cash millionaire. How did you do it? Well, firstly, I took care of, nurtured, invested the first dollar. So I earned 2. Then I did the same with 2, and then I did the same with 10, all the way up to millions. But I had to love where I was at, honor where I was at, have humility where I was at, gratitude for where I was at, invest in where I was at, nurture where I was at, appreciate it. And that which you appreciate is going to magnify. So that would be my third piece. Appreciate, love where you're at.
So make your purpose bigger than your problems. Every yard earns you the miles. That the whole flow thing is just not a reality. And 3 is love where you're at.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So how can people connect with you or connect with the work that you do?
The business I founded is called the Coaching Institute. So you can visit thecoachinginstitute.com.au and we can hook you up with some wonderful gifts, or you can join a class or come to a free event, however you want to ride. I think all my books, I've got 5 books are there as well. My latest is Ultimate You, which has done really well, Barry. I'm really proud of it. And it's a book it's not about business at all. I've written business books. It's a book about how to fall in love with ourselves and to find meaning, purpose, and joy where we're at, rather than thinking I need to have something different or something change, but it's just within me. And there's also a great book called, I think, is it called Simple Strategies for Business Success? Which is more of this conversation, is the other book that I've written that's a bestseller. So you can head over there and tap into that.
Awesome.
Just come along to one of our events and meet our amazing team and say, this is how we met, through Barry on the podcast. Yeah. And they'll be pleased to have you.
Yeah, cool. Sharon Pearson, thank you so much for giving up some of your time today. I've really enjoyed chatting, and you're right, we could have delved down in that for hours, if not months.
I hope it's valuable, Barry. I hope it serves, and I hope it helps people, perhaps inspires them and helps them aspire to who they can truly be. That would be the intention for this podcast. So thanks for having me.
So look, for anyone that's watching this or listening, feel free to post your comment or your question down below. Feel free to share it if it has meant something to you and been impactful, or even tag someone in who maybe needs to hear some of the knowledge and some of the wisdom that Sharon shared with us today. So once again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. All the best.